Welcome back into A to Z here on Locked On Sports Atlanta, free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Search Locked On Sports Atlanta. Again, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Locked On ATL. I'm at Mark Zinno, Markzinno. Joining us next is a man who literally needs no introduction. He is everything Atlanta sports. He's a good friend and a former colleague, but you know it's these bonds they stay tight between us. Let's welcome Matt Chernoff from 680 The Fan. Chuck and Chernoff here to the show. Matt, good afternoon. How are you?
Whoa, God, there I am. Zin, good to see you. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. It's always good to talk to you. Things going well in Chernoff land?
I mean, listen, if I complained, who would care? Everything's fine.
I would.
All I care about is how Zin is doing. A to Z is what I care about. I want to hear about every A, B, C, D to Z.
Yes, all of it. It's super important. So hopefully you can draw some more listeners to this program because nobody listens when I talk. That's for
wow.
Sure.
Jeez.
I know. You know how it is. You know how it is in this industry. It's tough here, Matty. We're all just trying to make our way in the world today.
I've heard stories.
Right. The Atlanta Braves trying to make their way through the NL East right now. And look, heading into the last homestand, they had a chance to get above 500. If they took 2 of 3 from Milwaukee, swept the Red Sox, and took 2 of 3 from San Diego, they would have been a gain above 500. And that to me would have sort of felt like the signal that they had turned the corner. That's some tough competition, at least with Milwaukee and San Diego, teams that you likely may see in the postseason. And I would have felt like things started to turn in a different direction. We had some yuckness against the Red Sox, some more yuckness against the Padres. And now we have yuckness about Ronald Acuña and everyone's screaming he shouldn't have come back, blah, 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 blah. I mean, you know, because every injury in baseball is connected to the last one you had. So it is what it is. But how quickly can the Braves look like a playoff team again?
How quickly? I mean, to me, that they have to answer that question. If there's such a thing as a World Series hangover, Zin, it looks like they're playing with it at times. I mean, this weekend's an example. This was elementary stuff, watching them just boot the ball around the infield. I mean, gift runs to the Padres on overthrows to first base, or Austin Riley not scooping balls at third. So these are little things that we don't complain about until you watch them on display for a full weekend against what looks like a pretty good Padre team. Do they have the talent to still do that? They do, but they're just playing a sloppy brand of baseball right now. I almost wonder, I don't know how much meetings matter and you know, players-only things. Like, there's a lot of guys that have to look at themselves and realize we're not playing up to our potential on, I don't know, of a 26-man roster. Half the roster hasn't played up to their potential to this point.
I would tell you this, and I said this before that last homestand, that my guess is, and ready for this, when the Braves are back above 500 again permanently, I'm going to tell you when it's going to be. And here's the date where I'll get nervous if they're not. But write this down on your calendar.
All right.
Wednesday, June 15th. Circle that date on your calendar, because here's what's going to happen, right? They're going to go play this road stand against Milwaukee and Miami. They'll get Philadelphia and Miami back here. NL East games are always toss-ups and tough. They got to go out to Arizona, which is a team that's a lot more, competitive than we thought. Then they'll travel to Colorado, who is good, but their pitching staff is an abomination. They get the bad Oakland A's, the bad Pittsburgh Pirates here at Truist, and then they get the horrible Washington Nationals. By the end of that series on June 15th, if after the A's, Pittsburgh, and Washington, they can't win enough games to be above 500, that's when I'll officially hit the panic button. Because at that point in time, after that 9-game stretch, it's like, wow, if you can't take 7 of 9 from those teams, there are some real systemic problems with this team right now that need to be addressed.
No, you might be right. Now, the one thing we all can't keep doing is falling back on last season. Well, they didn't get over 500 till the end of July. Now, part of the reason that mattered is because nobody in the NL East was good enough to pull away. We know the Mets have played at a high level. I don't know if they'll stay in it, but they're playing at the high level. Here's two issues. Number one, they haven't played well against bad teams. I mean, they're 8-10 against under 500 clubs to this point. They lost 2 games to a red team that left Atlanta one more game for the next 3 weeks, right? They played average against Texas. They happened to win a series against the Cubs, but they haven't been able to consistently do anything. Like, an example of what I'm talking about is this weekend against San Diego's in. They had leads in the 7th inning in 2 games, in the 8th inning in 1, and the only game they won took sort of a miracle comeback in the 8th inning after giving away one of the leads. So everything you said might be right. I don't know what the date is to start panicking and start being concerned. I'll say this. The team we're watching right now looks nothing like a playoff team. They just don't consistently hit. They strike out too much. Now you have the defense. This today does not look anything like a playoff team.
Not that I'm connecting the 2 injuries, but I still felt like they rushed Acuña back because they were 7 games behind the Mets. I mean, you have to assume that the Mets aren't going to play 700 baseball the entire year. And even if they've come back to earth a little bit, I guess they're only playing like 670, whatever it is now. But regardless, I just felt like they rushed him back. Like they put more emphasis on those series with the Mets than they needed to.
I mean, it could be. I mean, I don't think teams do that as much as we in the fandom and the media world think. Like, I think the Braves brought him back when they thought he was cleared health-wise. Whether or not his bat was ready was another discussion because he had no spring training and a very short rehab stint. I don't know. Can you point to the groin injury being anything connected to the knee? I have no idea. The knee is sound. Like, they've looked at that over and over. Ronald plays a style that is sort of a football style in a baseball player's body, right? He's going to steal bases. He's going to take extra bases. He's just going to play a certain way. And he said, I can't, tweak or pull back on what I do. I play this style of baseball. The fun thing for the fan is I wish more guys played the style that Ronald played. The dangerous part is it's going to come with injuries. It's going to come with him running into a wall or tweaking a groin or some of this stuff. I don't subscribe to they brought him back too early. I don't think a team brings a guy back too early. If the doctors say he's structurally sound with the knee, then you bring him back depending on when his bat is ready, and they thought that was the time. I don't have a huge issue with that.
Yeah, me neither. One more, and I'll ask this question at a macro level. It's not necessarily about stats. Do the Braves miss Freddie Freeman overall?
They might, and there's no question it could be brought up. But Zinn, I would say this. They had Freddie a year ago at this time, and they were doing the exact same stuff. Like they were at the same place. Yeah. Here's what I brought up on the radio one time, and I'll bring it up here. I think they miss Jock Peterson, and I know that doesn't seem to add up the same way the Freddie thing. Jock brought a presence with him, a badassness, a culture, stuff that I think cannot be measured in just pure OPS and analytics and those type of things. This is a very sort of vanilla baseball team with a bunch of good guys, likable guys. But who's the guy that's going to get up and go, you know what, MFers, we're better than this. Like, this is ridiculous. And I'm not saying it has to be the movie version of turning over a water cooler in the clubhouse. But you know what I mean. There are certain kind of personalities that you need.
They allow you to have fun playing baseball, and they allow you to get your mind right about the game, which is a grind. You can get sucked into slumps easily, and they sort of beget one another. Hitting begets more hitting, but just like bad play begets more bad play in baseball because you're around each other for 6 months every single day. So I agree. I think there is a certain amount of, for lack of a better term, joviality that this team is missing right now because of the pressure of being a World Series team.
I think also it's a Josh Donaldson type from a couple of years ago. Josh is quirky. Absolutely. Josh is weird. Josh is a little different. I think you have a lot of guys that kind of gotten in their own heads here a little bit. Dansby is an example of that throughout this season. There are some fundamental parts of this that are just not going to change. They strike out at an alarming rate. So that hurts you in playing comeback baseball. That hurts you in putting big innings together because you can't keep rallies going like that. They struck out 38 times this weekend against the Padres. So that, again, fundamentally, I don't know if that's going to change. It has to improve slightly. But when I say guys aren't living up to what your expectations are, Duvall hasn't. Ozzie hasn't. Dansby hasn't. Olsen, who got off to a great start, has been fine. But Austin hasn't. Like, you can go up and down this line and pick a bunch of these guys, and they're not getting that stuff from these guys the way they got it when they turned things around a year ago.
100%. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Told you June 15th. That's the date. Write it down. All right. Let's switch gears here to the Falcons because I just want to get one or two things out. Look, we know this team is going to struggle, right? The question for me is how competitive are they going to be? I'll say this much. I keep seeing these under the radar moves, which Arthur Smith is doing. Now, I'll sit here on, May 16th and tell you, I'm curious. I'm curious why he keeps signing every single 6'4", 212-pound receiver he can find. I want to know what he's going to do with all these guys. I want to know what the plan is. I can kind of sort of guesstimate and see what he's going to do. Look, all these moves could be complete disasters, and they could be a 3-14 team when it's all said and done, and nobody would be surprised. But I don't know. Maybe the FedEx guy's got a little bit of a plan here. Like maybe he understands something that they're trying to, turn their card counters at the blackjack table. They're trying to turn the odds on the casino, to quote Billy Bean from Moneyball. I kind of see where he might be going with that. Am I off on this?
No, I don't think so. If you're looking at the receiver room, it's pretty clear he and Dave Ragone have their plan of we want to play basketball on a football field. Yeah. And maybe that's somewhat to do with Marcus Mariota and maybe Desmond Ritter, who has had questions about accuracy. So if I'm going to put it in your direction, if you're 6'4" Drake London, or you're 6'6" Kyle Pitts, or I like the Brian Edwards move. It's like you said, a below the radar, 6'3", third-year receiver who I think will get opportunities here. They signed Auden Tate, who nobody knows from the Bengals, another 6'4" receiver. So I like the plan of we're going to box you out on short throws because we have big guys. It's going to help us in the red zone, and we're going to high point balls because we don't have the most accurate quarterbacks. I like that philosophy. You can do worse in this wide receiver room than they've done right now. And I didn't even mention Cordero Patterson, I think, is going to play more receiver this year. There's another big body, 6'3" guy. So I like the plan. Now it's a matter, can you run the ball to help the pass game, and can you protect the quarterbacks? Those two things I don't know yet.
By the way, you heard it here first. Tyler Algier is a week 1 starting running back. Barring an injury, He is the week 1 starting running back. And when they let Mike Davis go, that's exactly what they were telling the world, because Cordero is not a 12, 15 carry guy. He's a 6'8", kind of carry guy. But, your third down back is going to be Algier on 3rd and 1. And clearly nobody else in that running back room has any much more experience than he does anyway. So it's not about that.
I could see Damian Williams mixing in with that, but I have no problem. If Tyler Algier separates himself during camp and then during preseason, maybe. But I think Damian Williams is going to mix in there, and there'll still be some Cordero Patterson. But to the point, you can use him in so many different ways that it almost sort of bogs him down if you do have him carrying the ball 8, 10, 12 times, take some of the pounding he would take.
Yeah. Let me ask you to put your GM/owner/head coach hat on. What is Matt Chernoff's plan for Desmond Ritter?
Sitting and watching. I don't have high expectations for Desmond Ritter. I'd like to be pleasantly surprised, and this is a 3rd-round pick for a reason. Desmond Ritter, if we go by history in the NFL, he will be the exception, not the rule. If he happens to, A, become the starter, and B, become a big-time starter. Like everybody points to Russell Wilson. There's a reason we point to Russell Wilson. He's the ultimate exception to the rule. So my expectation is he should watch. He should watch for a while. Now, he will play because Marcus Mariota will get hurt. Marcus has always been a guy who's had trouble playing a full season. So that will happen. But Desmond Ritter, I think Desmond Ritter's a passing fancy. In other words, he's here. I set the over-under on starts at less than 20 in his career. I am not going to bet on the exception to the rule. You don't find your starting quarterback in the 3rd round typically. Maybe this will be a lucky instance where they did. I'm not counting on it.
No, I agree. But I think it's incumbent upon them to figure out if he can play one way or another. Because what the quarterback crop from next year, at least allegedly, and so much is going to happen between now and then. We have no idea what it's going to shake out and look like. But allegedly, there's a whole crop of young quarterbacks coming out who are better than this kid at this point in time. But you got to figure out if he can play. I mean, like you said, he's going to get an opportunity. Now, if it's me and I'm eyeing the calendar and looking at the schedule, obviously you would look at the post-Thursday night game because you get 10 days after, or the bye week. Now, unfortunately for them, both of those happen very late. It would be week 11 or week 14. I did say this much, though. Here's the date I circled. I'm circling a lot of dates on the calendar.
A lot of dates,
Listen, my date book is full. Don't tell my wife. But nonetheless, I look at the week 8 game against the Carolina Panthers. They're back home after Cincinnati. So they get Carolina. Then they're home again the following week against the Chargers. And then they get Carolina again 4 days later after that. So my point is in doing that is that it's rare that you see the same opponent 10 days apart, but at least you'll get a chance to understand the kid's growth curve and growth possibility by playing the same opponent 10 days apart and seeing what he can do and understand and what adjustments he can make. That to me seems like the opportune time to hand him the ball and say, here, kid, it's yours for the rest of the year. Now, again, with the start of the season, that's if they're 2-5, right? Or 1-6.
Right.
It's just time to make a change at that point. What do you keep running Mariota out there for if you're in that? Now, if you're 3-4, maybe things are different, but I'm assuming, given the toughness of the front of their schedule, that may be an opportune time to do it.
No, I don't think it's a bad time at all. I mean, if you think about, again, it's on paper, and the NFL has taught us many times we can be wrong about what we project. That schedule looks brutal. Like, that looks like 2-5, 1-6. I can't rule out 0-7 just based on the way the schedule looks. So if that's the case, one of two things. A, it's easy to replace Mariota with the kid and say, what do we have to lose? The other one is, if Marcus gets banged up in week 3, are you going to then say to Desmond Ritter, get in there, kid, against that schedule that we just talked about, with an offensive line that you and I both know is still going to be in transition, with a run game that we don't know what to expect from? I don't think it's a very good scenario, and I get your point that you want to evaluate him. But with the surroundings that they have, I don't think it's a stacked deck to really get an idea what he's going to be as a rookie. Typically, let's say he was a 3rd-round linebacker or a 3rd-round tight end. Then we wouldn't say, well, we have to know what he is in the first year. And I know the quarterback position is different. But the likelihood is you're not going to find answers you like in the rookie year of Desmond Ritter with this talent around him.
No, you're not. But again, it happens all the time. They threw Trevor Lawrence to the Wolves. Hell, they threw Joe Burrow to the Wolves with a rookie. What's his name? Not AJ Green was coming off the injury. Tyler Boyd was the only legitimate receiver on the team. And who's the other guy? T. Higgins was a rookie that year too. So he didn't have anything around him either. And he had a bad offensive line. But what you could see is that he made games competitive. He could play. I'm not asking him to win games. I'm asking him to make plays and keep things competitive. Even if it's for a half or 3 quarters and they end up losing it in the 4th quarter, I'm fine with that. But I think it's obvious at this point we can see when guys can play and when they can't.
I would agree. You could see some skill set in him that you like. You could see some stuff in him you like. I wouldn't expect it, though. I would be more pleasantly surprised if you find, wow, this could be a potential long-term answer. And you can go around the league and do the exception to the rule thing with Dak Prescott in the 4th, and you can do it with Russell in the 3rd. You can't do it a ton. Like, you really can't find many of those answers. And those guys, I think, walked into better situations, more talent around them, more things in place, more stability. Here's one scenario that I brought up that I would not rule out. Marcus Mariota is 28 years old. Marcus was the number 2 pick in the draft for a reason, and he is healthier than he's been. Now, I told you I think he'll get hurt because he always gets hurt. If he happens to stay healthy and plays up to his potential, there's a chance Marcus Mariota could have a better year than anybody wants, which I don't know if that's a good thing because that would end up winning you 6 games instead of 4 games and potentially hurting the long-term plan. But Marcus Mariota, you can do a lot worse as a bridge quarterback than Mariota, and I think Arthur Smith, having the success he did with Ryan Tannehill, I don't think it's past his mind that Marcus Mariota might be a longer-term answer than any of us want to address.
All right, one more. And I know we're going long here, but I don't get that much time with you these days, so I want to maximize it as much as possible.
I miss you.
I know, I miss you too. Atlanta Hawks. The top 4 teams, the 4 remaining teams in the NBA were the top 4 defensive teams in the league.
Yep.
I don't think I'm telling anybody anything they don't know and saying they have to figure out a way to play defense. I would say, 1, it's incumbent on Trey to actually put effort into it and make other people follow him. If you want to be the star, you want to be the big boy, start playing on both ends of the damn floor and make your teammates follow you too. I don't know how they get defensively better without a major roster reconstruction because you just don't have the players who do it. If you're telling me they do, then I look at the coach and go, you're not the guy to do this because clearly you've never emphasized it. So what is the short-term fix if there is one?
Well, there's a lot there. And number 1, Trey will never be much of a defensive player. Like you said, get in front of somebody when it matters in the playoffs. And I will tell you, his defense wasn't as bad as it's been in the past. That's a low bar. So I think sometimes we just get stuck. And his defense will never be good, but it was better than it has been. So that's 1. 2, yeah, your point on trying to reconstruct a roster to cover up for Trey, that's always been part of the issue of having your best player be a 6'1" point guard. This is Detroit Pistons bad boys of the late 80s and 90s. This is AI with the Sixers in the early 2000s, that you have to thread the needle to have Clint Capella. That's why they went and got Clint. DeAndre Hunter hasn't been the defensive player they thought he was. He's been good, not better than good. They drafted Cam Reddish for the same thing. The problem is Cam had an idea that he was going to be the number 1 scorer and not the things they asked him to do. You can go up and down this roster and you can see the reasons why they're not good. Now, you mentioned the coaching. Nate has always been a slow it down, emphasize defense guy, but he doesn't have the roster to do that. So I think this offseason is going to be fascinating to see 2 things. Can they, and this is not easy, can they find a number 2 to Trey that can take pressure off him in the playoffs when they meet a good Miami defense or Boston, but at the same time find defensive-minded players to surround their scorers with? Travis Schlank's got his work cut out for him, but I will say this, Sid. The best thing going for them is they have Trae Young. When you figure out your superstar at 23 years old, you can figure that stuff out a lot easier than you'll ever figure out how I get a superstar. Trying to get the number 2 piece, trying to get better defenders, hell of a lot easier than trying to find a guy who can score 28 and 10.
He's Matt Chernoff. See him, hear him every day on 680 The Fan on Chuck and Chernoff. You're the best, buddy. I know we went late, but thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Love you, buddy.
Look at that. You see that? I get kisses and everything from you. We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
See you, buddy.
All right. I'll take time. I'll come back, wrap things up next here on A to Z on Locked On Sports Atlanta, free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Search Locked On Sports Atlanta.